Hi, and welcome to this review of the Prince Valiant box set by Hal Foster. This is volume 1 through 3, taking place or written in 1937 through 1942. These were released as Sunday color full-page comics. Before we actually get into talking about Prince Valiant, we're going to just talk a little bit about the author and illustrator, Hal Foster, and where he came from and how he came to do Prince Valiant. Prior to doing Prince Valiant, Hal Foster had actually started doing Tarzan. He actually was working at a Chicago-based advertising studio called Polanski and Young Incorporated, and he was selected at that time to illustrate a 10-week comic strip of Tarzan. It first appeared in a British weekly magazine, Tidbits, on October 20th, 1928. And it would eventually be published here in the U.S. on January 7th, 1929. After the 10-week run of Tarzan, Foster would return to do the Sunday strip beginning in 1931, September, until May 9th, 1937. Now this book I'm just going to crack open just to give you an idea of the artwork and how it's changed from currently here in Tarzan, and like I said, September 27th, 1931, and how it's changed his art style all the way up into Prince Valiant began. You can see at the time these strips were just very basic. Still, in my opinion, great artwork. But you can definitely tell he was at the beginning of his career here. Like the Prince Valiant stories, these were ongoing stories that moved all over Africa into different locales as well. So as you can see, one of the things that Hal Foster does is when he writes, he doesn't put any word bubbles in. Everything is written as in novelization. You will use the quotes when dialogue happens. But otherwise, it's like you're actually reading a really big illustrated novel. So this is the Tarzan. Like I said, this is what he worked on prior to Prince Valiant. And you can see, even in Tarzan, how it's progressing his art style. Okay, so let's jump in and take a look at the Prince Valiant books. So while drawing Tarzan, Hal Foster created the title strip titled Derek, Son of Thane, later changing it to Prince Arn. And then in 1936, Foster pitched the story to William Randolph Hearst, and Hearst was so impressed with it that he gave Foster ownership of the strip and a 50-50 share of the profits. This was essentially unheard of at the time. And then Joseph Conley, the manager at King Features, renamed it Prince Valiant. And Prince Valiant made his print debut on Saturday, February 13th, 1937. So the first series, like I said, is a box set. Here's what the spine looks like when you see it on your shelf. It will say Prince Valiant, and then it will show Hal Foster, volume 1 through 7, 1937 to 1942, and nice little picture on here. The cover of the box sets show different panels from the comic strip. And then you can see very nice black spines with gold lettering, giving you the year and the volume number. So let's take these out and take a look at the first volume. So we have volume 3, volume 2, and volume 1. So each volume, again, comes with different panels on the cover of it. It gives you Prince Valiant. You can see it's an oversized book. If you were to compare it to a regular size comic, you can see that's what it looks like with a regular size comic. In regards to an omnibus, That's how it looks with an omnibus, the size difference. So I personally only got into Prince Valiant because of people in the different Facebook groups I belong to, who are talking about the artwork and the stories for the Prince Valiant run. Now, I've always been a Tarzan fan, Dick Tracy, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, The Phantom, Mandrake the Magician, all those comic strip runs from back in the day. One I always stayed away from was Prince Valiant, only because of his hairstyle. Because when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, that bowl cut, he looks like the Dutch boy painter boy, and it was a terrible haircut. So I actually stayed away from it, which now I wish I hadn't. So each one of these books does contain special features, like this one talks about Harold Rudolph Foster and his life. You can see he led quite a long life. He was born in Nova Scotia, like I mentioned, eventually becoming an American citizen. Then we have an interview with Hal Foster in here. And then you get into the actual strips themselves. You can see the detail on these is phenomenal. The change from Tarzan to Prince Valiant is very evident. Now, the great thing is Prince Valiant happens during the Arthurian times with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Originally, he had written some mystical stuff in here, giants, magics, things like that. But eventually, about 1942, he would steer away from that and try and be more factually accurate and historically accurate in his storytelling. One of the things that really impresses me is the detail in which he gives these stories and the pictures. To think that somebody had to churn these out every week is really impressive. So Prince Valiant starts off with his father, where they are beaten out of their kingdom. They're forced to run and hide in some marshes, and they make that essentially their kingdom where they're at. Prince Valiant eventually leaves and wants to go and become a Knight of the Round Table. So there's a lot of different jousting in here, fighting, etc. And we see that he progresses from just being a young boy to becoming a prince, or excuse me, a Knight of the Round Table very quickly. Now, also with these books, you can see that at the beginning of each page is a synopsis of what's happened the prior week. And then sometimes, depending on how he's drawn it, he may put in little numbers that tells you in which panels to read to get where you're going. So this would go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then to the next one, he starts again. So you got your 1, 2, 3, and it works all the way through. Now we can see that this is one of the mystical earlier ones, because we see it has a giant sea crocodile on it, which, you know, they really weren't there in England, as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong. Please correct me. So as you go through, another cool thing about these panels are he'll make large panels in here, make them smaller, depending on what needs to be said in the story, depending on how the artwork has to lay out, which I do love that. I feel it's ahead of its time in terms of the comic strips that I've read from other people at this time. But you can just see the detail is amazing. The stories are very violent, but you don't actually see any blood. He has no problem killing people. He kills quite a few people. I find these are very reminiscent of the Conan the Barbarian stories, where he's just going from one adventure to another and killing a lot of people along the way and falling in love with many women. So also, one of the great things about this character, Prince Valiant, he always leans more towards science. He doesn't believe in the whole mysticism thing, so he always looks for the scientific, logical reason for what is happening. Also, I gotta say, in a lot of these panels, it looks as if he had somebody modeling for him while he drew or painted the panels. Like this one here, the way he's drawn him clinging to this wooden pillar as he's being shot at with arrows, just the muscle that he has, definition there, says to me that this maybe was drawn by a model. He had somebody modeling this and drew it. It's just very, very impressive. So there's a lot of romance stories, not just with him, but people he knows. He's more than happy to help his friends get ahead with women if he needs to. One of his main character friends is Sir Gawain. Sir Gawain is one of the Knights of the Round Table. But his books, the stories, go all over through Europe, through Africa, into the Middle East, and through Jerusalem. And you just follow these adventures where he's with Vikings at one time. Then he fights the Hun, Attila the Hun, and his men at one time. Let's break out another volume here. By the way, this is my first time ever doing one of these videos, so forgive the ham-fisted way I'm doing everything. I'm just, excited about this book because when I read it, I just had to get through them all because it is a rousing adventure. It is a great story that some stories are longer than others, but it's one continuous ongoing story. All right. The continuity is very impressive, the way he has everything set. I also like that he'll even put in historic perspective, like when he draws his maps. He tries sometimes to give the modern name for the location as well as the ancient name for the location, just to help the reader out. It's very educational. Don't take it for granted that the stories are true, though, but at least he's putting it in the confines of historical accuracy in that regard, that this is what was happening in the UK at the time, or Brittany at the time. This was happening in the Middle East at the time, etc. So you can see the battle scenes, again, are very detailed. Here's where he becomes a knight. But it's just a great read. If you haven't read it, I really recommend you read it. It is a page turner. If you ever read the Arthurian legend as a kid, then you know what to expect in terms of the rousing adventures and just the historical impact of it all. Dealing with the Romans and, like I said, the Huns. But I can't recommend this enough. I can't wait to get into the second box set, which I've just received. So I have the first three. Again, I'd really recommend it. Here he is in Rome, makes his way to Rome, fighting Roman soldiers, dealing with the murder of the Emperor Valentine, even though, of course, in real life he wasn't murdered like this. I believe he died of a stroke. I'm not sure. I think he was actually out on a battle and had a stroke. I'd have to check. But we can see just fantastic, fantastic artwork. You get to see, like I said, historical places that really exist. So imagine having read this in the late 1930s and you're a kid. Remember, they didn't have phones at that time that you could just click a picture from around the world. You couldn't jump on the internet. You had to rely on people actually traveling to those locations, taking photographs and bringing that information back and then sharing it in the U.S. So to me, as a kid and reading this, it told stories of faraway lands and just was one adventure after another. So that's the first two. And then there is the third and final volume in this, up through 1942. Like I said, I finished all of these. They're just really great. Here he is in the Middle East at this time. He's fighting the Huns. There is interaction with the Muslims. It's just, again, I can't recommend enough reading it. Then he makes his way down into Africa. You can see he's fighting a giant gorilla in Africa. But it's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. I mean, look at that panel with the elephant. So much of this artwork looks like it could just be hanging on a wall in your home. It's just so impressive. The detail, and he really knows how to draw faces, especially women. When he wants to draw a beautiful woman for Prince Valiant, he does this amazing job of getting the detail on the face and just makes the women look so beautiful. But the story also has humor in it. As an example, this story, two old knights who've been fighting. They don't even get into why. But it's just a great story that just lasts a couple of pages, that just moves the characters along on their quest through Europe. All right, well, that's all I really have to say about this. I just wanted to really recommend this book or this series to anybody. If you love comics, if you love great animation and just great writing, I can't recommend enough Prince Valiant by Harold Foster. If you have anything to contribute, please leave them in the comments. Anything I got wrong, please feel free to correct me. Any more information you want to share with people in the comments would be great as well as to me. I'm looking for more stuff like this to read. So any recommendations would be fantastic. All right, thank you very much, and you guys have a wonderful day.